Hi, and welcome. It's good to see everyone. If you're coming back from previous weeks, welcome back. If you're here for the first time, it's good to see you. This is the second session of Three Themes of Teshuva in Ursula Le Guin's A Wizard of Earthsea with Rabbi Dan Margulies, part of Elul's Man at Drisha. We're really glad to have him back. He's taught at our kollel. Rabbi Dan's taught, you know, even back in person, back in the old days, and we're very happy to have him here. Sources will be shared on screen momentarily. And with that, I'll cut the rest of the intro short and hand over the mic.
Thank you so much, Kayla. Last week I thought was such a wonderful conversation. It really was fantastic to have people participate so actively. So really love to encourage that. I am a classroom teacher, during working hours. So it is always great to, we're all here learning together. It's facilitated learning, not teaching. And it's really wonderful to have all of you here. And it's incredible that we're getting so close to Rosh Hashanah. Like I said, this for me has been a book that I've used for my own preparation for Rosh Hashanah in various ways over the past few years, especially. And so it's really powerful for me to be reflecting on some of these themes of tshuva as we're in the season right now. I think everyone who's here tonight, or most of the people who are here tonight, were here last week. So just as a reminder, at least the main themes that I tried to touch on last week. I know last week felt a little bit rough around the edges. That was because I was a little bit rushed putting it together this week. Thankfully, I've had a little bit more time to get everything shaped together. Last week was about verbalization and concretization, the use of words and speech to the power of verbal confession of sin as a way of making clear to ourselves what we're talking about when we talk about our own shortcomings, our own failures in the past, and how we plan to move past them in the future. And so the power of speech in forming and shaping the world we relate to is something that LeGuin's novels really very deeply relate to because of the magical system she constructs in her fantasy world in Earthsea. This week, we're going to talk about the power of names and identity. So as I think I touched on a little bit last week, the idea of names in LeGuin's magical system is very much in speech, and that is that every person, but also every physical object, every body of water, every species of wild animal, et cetera, has its name in, as she calls it, the old speech or the true speech. And in her world, this is the language that dragons speak natively, and which human beings have to labor very difficultly in order to learn the words of the true speech, the old speech, in order to describe the world around them. But through describing things in the true speech, you can also bring about a certain effect because, at least for human beings, it's impossible to tell a lie in this language. Now, already this is incredibly resonant for me as a reader of rabbinic texts. I'm thinking of the fact that Chazal describe God creating the universe through speech, of course, based off of Breshit Perek Aleph, but how Chazal draw that to the fore in Pirkei Avot. The universe was created through 10 speech acts, 10 utterances. The fact that Chazal describe Chotamo Shel Hakadosh Baruch Hu Emet, that truth is the mark of what is truly divine, and therefore, in a sense, God's speech. I think I mentioned this last week, right? How is it that God creates the universe? God says, Yehi or, Vayhi or. The way we usually think of that is there is some concept called or that God is invoking, that God is trying to, so to speak, to bring into being through saying Yehi or, let the light be. In fact, at least again, some Kabbalistic ways of interpreting this would read it the opposite. The idea is God speaks the word or, and since the word or is a true word because God is saying it, then it must be that the or exists. And so it must obey. And so that has a lot of resonance with a number of passages in LeGuin's novels where she talks about, like, Ged later in life in the second book, he summons a rabbit to him by calling its name and things like that. And then he feels bad, like he's sort of out in the woods with another character, Tanar, and they're very hungry. So she's like, can't you like use your magic to summon some animal for us to eat? So he's like, I could call the rabbit to me, and he does. He summons the rabbit. He's like, but now it's my brother. Like, I know it. Like I understand it, and it understands me, and we're friends. So like I can't kill it. You know. So there is something about that identification with that which we name and understand. with that, I want to get into some of the rabbinic texts. I have the sources here on the screen. Hopefully you can see and share. And I put with translations. So hopefully people who maybe not so fluent in the Hebrew can still follow along and participate. The first is really the crux where we're going to get started and focus on is a Gemara from Masechet Rosh Hashanah as follows. Maybe some people familiar with this. I want to kind of get us to read it with some precision here. So let's see what it says. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Arba'a divarim makri'in gzar dino shel adam. There are four things which can tear apart a person's sentence. Eluhein tzedakah, tze'aka, shinui Hashem, v'shinui ma'aseh. Giving to charity, crying out in prayer, shinui Hashem, changing the name, and shinui ma'aseh, changing your behavior. Now, of course, like, first of all, if we're talking about Teshuva, why put the most obvious one at the end? Yeah, of course, the most effective form of Teshuva is actually changing what you're trying to change about yourself. If you've been a shoplifter in the past and then you stop shoplifting, so you're not a shoplifter anymore, right? Why is that one stuck in at the end? We're not talking about that one right now. I want to focus on the change of name. Shinui Hashem Dichtiv gives the following example. Sarai ishtecha lo tikra et shema Sarai ki Sarah shema. In Bereshit chapter 17, this is when God changes both Avram's name to Avraham and Sarai's name to Sarah. And along with that, in that very moment, God brings to bear the covenantal promise that they will have a child. So the promise that they will have a future, that their fate has been changed, that their circumstance is changed. Obviously, this is not teshuvah for a sin necessarily, because I don't think we would ascribe to Avram and Sarai in their pre-name change state of being sinful behaviors necessarily. But it's saying, yes, Sarai was unable to have a child. Avram was able to have a child with Hagar, but not with Sarai. But Avraham and Sarah will be able to have a child together, and that child will be Yitzchak. And so the change of name is a changed identity and therefore also a changed circumstance and a changed destiny. You with me? Okay. How many Shiurim on Tshuva do we get at Rabbi Akiva Eger's Kasha? Okay, for those who've been in the Beit Midrash learning Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Eger's Kasha usually comes up when we're talking about, heavy, Nezikin Sugyot, Nashim Sugyot, not necessarily the more religious, we think of this stuff as soft topic. It's not a soft topic, it's a very deep topic. So Rabbi Akiva Eger says the following. He makes a comment here based off of the Shut HaRosh, the responsa of Rabbeinu Asher of the early 14th century, mid 14th century Spain. It sort of depends on when we count editing it. The sons edited it for him, whatever. There are four things that tear apart a person's decree. B'shut harosh of klal yud zayin hevi hanusach shlosha divarim mevatelin hagezira. So Rabbi Akiva Eger is familiar with the Shut HaRosh and says the Rosh at least had in front of him, ostensibly, a different version of the Gemara text. And this is what's interesting for us. That there are three things which mevatlin, cancel, not makri'in, tear apart, but mevatlin, cancel. I don't think that's such a big difference. But there are three things, not four. And the way it's expressed, it's the three things. And then af shinui Hashem, even changing your name. That is, the changing your name one is the last one on the list, not changing your behavior. That is, what are the three most obvious ones in the Rush's version? The three most obvious ones are tzedakah, giving to charity, tzedakah, crying out in prayer, and shinui ma'aseh, changing your actions. Basically, the three things that we usually think of when we think about the process of repentance. Get rid of the bad thing that you were doing, cry out in prayer and confession and repentant prayers to God, both individually and communally, and do something good, do something charitable. And also changing your name. So is changing your name something which is a more obvious thing that would bring about the process of teshuvah, or is changing your name something that's a surprise? And how many people do we know who've changed their name out of a process of teshuvah? Though maybe there are many other scenarios where people do change their name. So let me pose that as a question to the group first. Think of a scenario where a person changes their name. There could be many different such scenarios that we're familiar with in the world today, right?
Conversion?
Okay, Talia says process of conversion, right? A convert joins the Jewish people, wants to adopt for themselves, whether it's their Hebrew name that they use only in a religious context, or if they even start using that as their sort of day-to-day use name, but they adopt a Jewish name to signify their new Jewish identity. Okay, excellent. What else?
When people get married, women sometimes change their name.
Okay, right. So change in marital status. Often couples either adopt a different last name or change a last name or take on a second name. There are many different customs in different parts of the world. Um, anyone here knows there was a Purim spiel now from many years ago. It's called the Avera song. It became popular in certain circles.
Oh
So
yeah.
the character in the Avera song says, "I changed my name to Sam from Shmuel." Right. So what is he saying there? It's a farce of perhaps the opposite effect, which we've also seen, of course, which is people who, so to speak, flip out, whatever that means, adopting a Hebraicized version of the name that they used to go by, or using their Hebrew name more often than their quote unquote English name. I remember there was also some of this was from Mount Sinai, also many years ago, Kayla. Washington Heights represent Purim Spiel, right? I guess it was when the iPhone had recently come out. I'm dating myself now because I'm still aware of this. Or was when Siri was new. So it was like
Yeah,
iPhone
it
3,
was when
iPhone
Siri
4,
came
something.
out.
And so it's like this, so they made like, what if Siri was like an Orthodox Jewish woman on your phone, right? So it was like, oh, I tried to cancel my chavruta. It's like, I rescheduled your chavruta. You need to learn more, and it's like, don't call me Siri. That's my English name. Call me Suri, So it's like, so there is this idea of like a code switching where depending on which community we're interfacing with or what kind of mask we choose to wear, we may present with a different name.
Really nice comment in chat from
Oh,
Yonan Chista from a Leonard Cohen quote.
oh, Leonard Cohen. Maybe it's one I'm not so familiar with. So you have to tell me. What? Yeah.
Quote, my name is Theodotus, do not call me Jonathan from Song of the
Oh,
Hellenist Jew.
okay. I have
And the
to
link
do
is
more
in chat if you want
chazara
to
on
check it out.
Leonard Cohen. As many people I know, hopefully know, obviously a number of his songs touch on very Jewish themes, and especially, of course, "Who by Fire" is literally Untan Tokef recast for the 20th century, right? So Leonard Cohen grew up, going to a nice from shul in Montreal, so Canadian Jews represent. Okay, Shinui Hashem. So, right, of course, many transgender people adopt a new name when they transition to a new role in society, how they present and how they want people to relate to them. So there there are times when people use different names, but then there's also like adopting a new name permanently and in a fixed way to signal this is a new identity. I'm a new person. So let's take a look at the Rambam number 3, Hot Teshuva. The Rambam says, "Midarkei ha-teshuva liot hashav tzoek tamid lifnei Hashem." Someone who is doing teshuva cries out constantly before God, bevechi v'tachanunim, with crying out at tears, all of these things. Ve'oset tzedakah kefi kocho. They do charity. They're very kind to other people, etc., etc. Umitrachek harbe min hadavar shechatabo. You have to fully distance yourself from the thing that you used to struggle with. Umishane shemo, and to change your name. In what sense? Says the Rambam the following: Kolomar she'ani acher. I am, so to speak, a different person. Ve'eni oto ha'ish she'asa otan ha'maasim. I'm not the same person who did that. So this is a rupturous break with the past, right? This is to say, I am not the same person who did that sin. So and so. Now we can decide whether we think this is compelling. That's part of the topic for tonight's exploration. Imagine, we got to pick a random name here, right? In the memory of one of my great teachers who has just passed away this past week, Rabbi David Ebner, we'll use the name Harold. Okay, Rabbi Ebner always used Harold as his nemesis. So imagine that Harold is a bank robber, right? So Harold is a bank robber. He's been robbing banks for decades. He's a notorious criminal. Wakes up one morning and Harold says, I don't want to be a bank robber anymore. I want to do Teshuva for my sin. I'm not Harold anymore. Now I'm Chaim. Has Harold done Teshuva for the sin of the bank robberies? Harold is a bank robber. I'm not Harold. I'm Chaim. The police come to arrest him. He says, no, I'm not. I'm not that guy. I'm a different guy. Does that really work? What does the Rambam say? Let's find the key phrase here. Midarkei hatshuva. This is one of the paths of doing repentance. This is a mechanism that a person can choose to employ in service of effective tshuva. This is not a replacement for actually improving yourself or changing yourself. This is a way to remind yourself, to signal to yourself that you have changed. You understand the difference, right? If we're in yeshiva, we can call a difference between siman and siba, right? Is the name change is a siman. A name is just an indicator. A name is just a symbol that we use for the person. To say that I, the person, have changed, you adopt a new name. It's not that the new name is effective itself in changing the person, right? Because that would be absurd, right? Unless I'm wrong. Like if I put a slice of cheese on a piece of bread and it's called a grilled cheese sandwich, right? And if I say, no, call it tuna fish now, it's not going to make it a tuna fish sandwich, right? Yes, Yon.
I love what you're saying, and it's of course so reasonable. It's like it's so reasonable that I feel an irrational urge to strongman the
Okay, so we'll definitely
contrary.
strongman it, and then I'm gonna
Okay.
push back. So the strongman is gonna be Rav Soloveitchik, and then we'll disagree with Rav Soloveitchik a little bit from LeGuin's. That's the plan. Sounds good? Okay. We don't have to do the Ran necessarily. Oh, we could do the Ran. The Ran says, in what sense? Changing your name is something that can inspire you, cause you to bring about a change in yourself. Again, not that the name change is itself effective per se in changing the person. So let's take a look. Number 5 is from Rav Soloveitchik's magnum opus of Jewish philosophy, Shahalacha, the Halachic Man. And this is not the only passage where he addresses this topic, but this is really one of the core places. He says, this is now the only Lawrence in my mind. I'm doing wrong last name. Lawrence Fishburne is the actor. It's not Lawrence Fishburne. Lawrence
Kaplan.
Kaplan. Yes, Larry Kaplan. Sorry. Professor Kaplan's translation into English. Thank you, Benjamin. Okay. It says repentance, according to the Halachic view, is an act of creation, self-creation. The severing of one's psychic identity with one's previous I and the creation of a new I. Yetzirat Anochi Chadash. So on the one hand, that's incredibly powerful. Here, this Rav Soloveitchik is talking about how the process of repentance is a creative act, is the expression of the most human quality of creation, in the sense that just like God creates humanity, right? Every person is empowered within themselves to create their own identity, to mold who they are. And therefore, the best mechanism of that, fascinating that he calls this, of course, halachic man, because this is not really what we would usually think of when we think of halacha. Of course it is, but it's not, right? My Rebbe Zatzal, Rav Simcha Kraus, said when we were learning Hilchot Teshuvah now many years ago, he said, it was a class of, like 18-year-old kids. He said, like, this isn't a Musar book. We were learning the Rambam's Hilchot Teshuvah from the Mishnah Torah, and he said, it's not a Musar book. This is halacha. Like, you would think, right? Like, oh, we're learning about how to do tshuva. It's like about self-improvement. It's a bit fluffy. It's right. It's not fluffy. This is very serious. Again, how do you cast that exactly? And there's a pejorative piece there as well. Okay, disparaging certain types of learning over others. Wow. I've gotten older since then also. Okay. Creating a new psychic identity, severing your connection with the past. self-creation, self-redefinition. He says, Hafka'at shem rasha, undoing the fact that you are called a rasha, a sinner, and instead creating a new name for yourself, creating a new sense of identity. This can only be attained if the sinner terminates their past identity, assumes a new identity for the future. So, on the one hand, this is incredibly beautiful, right? This is saying, right, each human being is empowered with the capacity to define for themselves who they are and what their future looks like. And that's what Teshuva is. And that's creative act on par with God's creation of the universe and God's creation of humanity. Like, wow, amazing, right? So I totally get why Rav Soloveitchik loves this idea. Yona, is that what you were getting at with the strong manning idea, right? Like,
Close. I think my angle's a little different. So
okay,
you let me know when is
well, you can talk, of course.
okay. Well, I mean, I adore this passage's emphasis on the sort of like the self creation, but a name is usually something that other people call you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
successfully changing your name depends on changed boundaries, right? If
And
you're
you have to shape how others respond to you. You have to
right,
actualize it.
are they going to buy into it? If you're that robber Harold and your robber buddies call you up, the minute that they greet you,
Right.
you would have to be setting a boundary with them and correcting them on what name they are to address you with. This seems like something that is substantial in and of itself.
Right. And now the other creative piece that I'm thinking of, which ties into it as well, is names in the Torah. The first acts of naming are in Breshit Parak Aleph. God names the light, right? Vayikra Elohim laor yom, velachoshech kara laila, right? But then in chapter 2, the human being gives names to the animals. The man gives a name to the woman. Later, the man gives a different name to the woman. The whole thing, okay? Judith Klitzner has a whole discussion of that in her book. So, and again, right? Does the person respond? Well, I could think of so many other ideas here for Yom Kippur. Okay, but 1 second. To teach or not to teach is always a question. This one I have to pause, but this we'll save for another time. Yeah, so right, exactly as Yona is saying, right? There's the responsive aspect. There's a name is how you invoke someone, but that means that they have to be bought into it, and or the person invoking the name has to be bought into the new name. Yeah, Benjamin, you looked like you had your hand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that Yona's sort of hypothetical about like if Harold the thief encounters his friends and do they see him as his new identity of the thief. I was gonna say, I mean, it is the plot of Ushpizen, isn't it?
Right.
That was my
And
point.
many other heist movies also, not just Dushpiza.
Right, but that's the only one that involves a literal Baal Teshuva. But yes, exactly.
Of course. Though I'll say, right? Well, you mean a figurative Baal Tshuva. Okay. No, right? We talked about Baal Tshuva right last week. What was I gonna say? Um Heist, Ushpizen. Oh, when Ushpizen came out, my brother and I saw it in theaters. And we were only ones in theater in America who understood the Hebrew, I think. So my brother and I were laughing at all the jokes. And all the Americans who were seeing it as like it's a fancy foreign film. So they like didn't follow the humor. And they didn't get that it's a hilarious movie. Okay. Anyway, it is a hilarious movie. He does not fight the shadows of a dead past. For those who've read the book, Wizard of Earthsea already. Oh, so many resonances here. What is Rav Soloveitchik saying? You're creating a new identity. This is severing your psychic identity with your previous I. If you give this passage from Halachic Man to your therapist to read, what is the therapist going to say? The psychiatrist here, the social worker here, whatever, is going to hate this. This is incredibly dangerous at a mental health level, right? I think the general consensus nowadays is you do not want to create any sense of severing your connection to your past or or bifurcating your identity or anything like this. This is how people get multiple personalities and all kinds of PTSD related to these kinds of things. This is people disassociating and putting things into compartmentalizing their psychology in a very dangerous way. So on the one hand, Rav Soloveitchik is describing something which evokes a very positive feeling of you're creating your new identity, you're shaping your future. And at the same time, the fact that it's such a violent break with the past is a rupture, is quite disturbing, I think. Again, it took me a while to see it that way. Yeah?
I tend to read Rav Soloveitchik in general as kind of much of what he says is kind of Guzma Ba'alma. It's just sort of an
Okay.
exaggeration. He's creating a type. Like I think nobody sane certainly would read Rav Soloveitchik as like giving practical, psychological advice, given that he's fundamentally half a Darshan and half a neo-Kantian philosopher.
Okay, so to what extent is this a manual for effective individual teshuvah, or is he here describing a particular abstract type of the halachic man and how the halachic man does teshuvah? As an aside, a very yeshivish kind of a, I think it's a klutz kasha, but you have to ask it anyway. The Stei Chemed has the following comment. I forget his answer, but the question is a good question. Well, it's a dumb question. I don't know. Stei Chemed was very smart, so maybe it's not a dumb question. The question is as follows. There's a category in halacha called lav hanitak lasei, that if there's a prohibition which carries a punishment, but which the prohibition can be rectified by doing some positive mitzvah to solve the problem, then you don't actually incur a punishment for it because you can just fix it. For example, the classic example is the prohibition of notar. You're not allowed to leave parts of certain sacrifices over past the time when you're supposed to eat them, but the Torah gives a mitzvah that if the sacrificial meat is left over, you don't earn a punishment. Rather, what are you supposed to do? V'hanotar whatever is left over, you're supposed to burn it in a fire. So since there's a positive mitzvah to do, there's no punishment for having left the leftovers. Instead, you just fix the problem. Lav hanitak lase. You have a prohibition that is then granted over to a positive mitzvah to rectify the problem. So the Stei Chemed asks, how come every prohibition in the Torah does not count as lav hanitak lase for the positive mitzvah of teshuvah? You broke this mitzvah, so now you can solve the problem by doing tshuva for it.
Tshuva
so
is
you
its
never
own
earn
mitzvah?
it. What?
Tshuva is its own mitzvah now?
Of course, tshuva is a mitzvah. Tshuva, vidui, exactly which one.
Exactly.
Okay, but there is some positive mitzvah which can serve to rectify the sin. So he says, how come every mitzvah isn't lav hanitak le'aseh? Again, like, no, you missed the point, right? Like, again, like a very overly technical analysis of what's going on with the idea of teshuvah, which is there is a problem and you have to fix it. So the problem is this rupturous aspect here, as Rav Soloveitchik describes. That is, I think, a healthy psychological approach that anybody would tell you, and this is what LeGuin's, what Talia, you're raising hand. I want to hear what you have to say.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I had a different class on Teshuva that also like talked about this kind of thing where the idea is that you're saying, okay, that's not me anymore, right? That me is in the past, and now I'm creating this new me. It kind of rubs me the wrong way because to me it feels like it makes it very easy to just remove yourself from responsibility. Like you just get to
100%.
sort of say, I'm like this new person. And I mean, I think that what Rav Soloveitchik here is talking about is something much, much deeper than that. But I think it's very easy to take it at a surface level. And I also think it's the opposite of what you said last week with the Wizard of Earthsea, right? Where like he has to realize that you can't actually keep running away from your mistake. You can't just magically become a new person because the mistake is part of you. It is you. So I don't know. I find a little bit of tension here with this kind of interpretation.
No, 100%. And I love what you're saying about like the running away piece or using it as a shield. We know many times public figures or politicians or whomever, celebrities, will get caught in some kind of a scandal, right? And it's very easy for someone to just say, I make a public apology, I'm done, right? Like, okay, I did that, and now I'm not that person anymore. I don't do that anymore. And it's like, did you actually learn your lesson? Did you actually change? Did you actually reshape your identity in a new way? Like, have you earned a new title, a new name because of this? Like, I don't know whether you actually did the work or you're just using this as cover, right? Um, okay. So let's take a look at some of the passages from the book. Last week I didn't give you quotes from the book, and this week I want to look a little bit at some of them. Chapter 2 is when he sort of first has his the pre mistake before it comes later. Let's not focus on this one right now, but let's take a little bit farther and take a look at the names. So this is the passage I mentioned last week, was when he's entering the school, right? Chapter 3, the school for wizards. He's talking to the doorkeeper. So the doorkeeper says, say your name. Then again, Ged stood still a while, for a man never speaks his own name aloud. By the way, here, of course, LeGuin uses his true name in narrating rather than his use name, because, of course, he's internally processing the risk to his name. For a man never speaks his own name aloud until more than his life's safety is at stake. I am Ged, he said aloud. Stepping forward, then he entered the open doorway. Yet it seemed to him, though, that the light was behind him. A shadow followed him in at his heels. This is his shadow, the other aspect that he has loosed in chapter 2, which then comes along, etc., etc., etc. He's a student in school. He has this rivalry with Jasper. Okay. Here we have the discussion with the master hand, one of the professors at the school who's teaching him. And this is about the difference between illusions and real change. Okay. Someone like to volunteer? Again, I just love this book, so I would love to hear somebody read from it. This paragraph from But One Day, who has like a nice theatrical voice, who likes to read it aloud. I have little kids, so I'm used to reading books aloud. No, I can do it.
I'm happy to try.
Go for it, Kayla. But one day.
But one day, having it in mind to put Jasper to shame at last, Ged said to the master hand in the court of seeming, Sir, all these charms are much the same. Knowing one, you know them all. And as soon as the spell weaving ceases, the illusion vanishes. Now, if I make a pebble into a diamond, and he did so with a word and a flick of his wrist, what must I do to make that diamond remain diamond? How is the changing spell locked and made to last? The master hand looked at the jewel that glittered on Ged's palm, bright as the prize of a dragon's hoard. The old master murmured one word, Tok, and there lay the pebble. No jewel, but a rough gray bit of rock. The master took it and held it out in his own hand. This is a rock. Tolk is the true speech. He looked up, mildly at Ged now. A bit of the stone of which Roke Isle is made, a bit of the dry land on which men live. It is itself. It is part of the world. By the illusion change, you can make it look like a diamond, or a flower, or a fly, or an eye, or a flame. The rock flickered from shape to shape as he named them, and returned to rock. But that is mere seeming. Illusion fools the beholder's senses. It makes him see and hear and feel the thing that is changed, but it does not change the thing. To change this rock into a jewel, you must change its true name. And you can do that, my son, even to so small a scrap of the world is change the world. It can be done. Indeed, it can be done. It is the art of the master changer, and you will learn it when you are ready to learn it. But you must not change one thing, one pebble, when the grain of sand, until you know what
that
good
should be
evil
grain of
will
sand.
follow will on that act. The world is in balance, in equilibrium. A wizard's power of changing and of summoning can shake the balance of the world. It is most perilous. It must follow knowledge and serve need. To light a candle is to cast a shadow.
Okay. So there's a lot there, right? Okay. So number one, of course, right, the difference between illusion and real change. The invoking of a thing's name to indicate whether or not it has changed. The idea that to change the thing is, of course, to change its entire universe and everything else, right? One of the deepest lessons I think I learned in a physics class from thermodynamics, right, is whenever you're talking about a system and its surroundings. Well, the system plus its surroundings is the entire universe. So if something is going to leave your system and it's going to go out into the surroundings, that's the whole universe we're talking about now, right? Like, you can never be apart, right? What is it, John Donne? No man is an island apart to himself, right? So, see, even though I grew up in the 90s, my father still made me memorize poetry. So maybe I don't know. Okay. Um, and to light a candle is to cast a shadow, which of course we also know from Chazal, right? Shiraga b'tiara mimahani, right? Of what use is a candle in the daytime? The purpose of a candle is, of course, to provide light, but it is, of course, also to exist in the darkness, to provide shadow, contrast. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot here. And there's, of course, a lot about, well, is a diamond more valuable than a piece of rock? Like, actually, sometimes rocks are more useful than diamonds, right? And you shouldn't disparage them that either. That continues that in the next part of the paragraph. Okay. Right, of course, right? He talks to the master changer. If the thing is to be changed, it must be renamed. But of course, the problem of renaming in this world, right, is that the name is the thing itself. No, oh, where did we hear that? We heard that in the Rambam when he talks about Shmo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the name of God is not separate from God. The wisdom of God is not separate from God. The wisdom of God is coterminous with God. The name of God is coterminous with God, because God is singular and unitary and cannot be subdivided or described in any way, right? The Navi Zechariah says, Bayom hahu yihya Adonai echad u'shemo echad. The Messianic future is one in which God's name and God's true self have actually reached apparent to humans, a unity that is not yet necessarily apparent. Okay, again, lots here, right? You tell me when you want to bounce off. So finally, here's the passage, chapter 4. In this moment of hubris, this moment of competition and feeling that he's less than his colleague Jasper, he decides to summon up a spirit from the dead, and he summons up the spirit of Elfaran, who lived thousands of years ago, who they know about from the ancient songs and all the great mythology of their culture. And he summons her, and at first he sees the form of this beautiful woman from the past, but then morphs. Only for a moment did the spirit glimmer there. Then the sallow oval between Ged's arms grew bright. It widened and spread, a rent in the darkness of the earth and night, a ripping open of the fabric of the world. Through it blazed a terrible brightness. And by the way, the brightness is what's terrible, right? Think of Steven Spielberg, Poltergeist, right? Schindler's List, of course, right? Somebody pointed this out, and it's amazing once you've heard it. In all of Steven Spielberg's greatest movies, right? The scariest things take place with light, with bright. You're safe in the dark because it's a reflection on the Shoah. It's a reflection on the Holocaust. What was the great terror of the Holocaust is that it took place in the full knowledge and full vision of the surrounding world, and nobody did anything. And you were safe if you could escape into the darkness. Okay. It's also something to think about. See, I'm good for tangents, right? If you're not following the main shear, at least you could get something from the tangents. Okay. And through that bright misshapen breach clambered something like a clot of black shadow, quick and hideous, and it leaped straight out at Ged's face. Okay, so this is the shadow of his hubris, the shadow of his insecurity, the shadow of his conflict with his peers and his inability to be proud of himself for who he is rather than measuring himself against another, and grass is always greener and all that. And the shadow reaches out to him. And of course, right, if it's a shadow, of course, whose shadow is it, right? But it takes him the whole book to figure that out, right? And so the shadow is reaching for him. And he discusses with another wizard, right? It has no name, but of course, if it's a shadow, whose name does it have? It has his name. That's what he discovers at the end. And so that's the point I want to get to, which is Rav Soloveitchik's vision of Teshuva is Mishaneh Shemo, is change your name, become a new person, redefine yourself, sever that connection with your past. The way to understand having defeated the evil within, whatever that is, whatever we struggle with, whatever we fail at, whatever we're trying to improve, the way to fix that is to get rid of it, cut it off, which is very brutal and very violent and very damaging in certain ways. Maybe it's effective if necessary under extreme circumstances, right? If we're talking about a drug addict needs to stop using the drug, right? If a person is in a toxic relationship with an abusive person and the thing that they need to improve is severing that relationship with that person, maybe that's the right choice. But it's also a very violent, drastic kind of change. And so instead, what Ged discovers over the course of his journey in Wizard of Earthsea is that he needs to instead reach out to and identify with his shadow. He needs to become reunited with his shadow. He needs to heal the rupture. And if we think about, again, we're not talking about like, oh, I forgot to say Birkat Hamazon today. So like, right? I remember this was another important tshuva moment, which again, it's like the things you hear from different kinds of rabbis, right? That a teacher of mine when I was in my 20s, let's say, was discussing with somebody around Rosh Hashanah time, like, oh, like, what are some of the things you're working on? What are the things you're, excited about trying to improve about in the coming year? And she told him, like, oh, like, I really want to make sure that when I say Birkat Hamazon this year, like, I'm going to say Birkat Hamazon from a bencher instead of saying it by heart. Like, okay. Anybody knows the Peretz story? Bunch of right? A bunch of this, right? A hot roll with butter. Like, that's the saddest thing in the world. The devil laughs when he hears a hot roll with butter, right? Like, seriously? That's what you're davening for on Yom Kippur, that you want to say Birkat Hamazon from a bencher instead of by heart? Like, of all the things in the world that we could change, all the things in the world that we could improve, okay? For ourselves and for our community and for the world at large and for humanity, right? So, I find you have a small imagination. How did I get on this topic? Sorry.
Something, simple things, something.
Simple things, right? Simple things are important, fine, okay. But like if we're talking about, oh, that's what it was. It's like there is a place within us that the things that we're trying to fix are seated. They live there because it's not a different person from us. It's the same person. Who I am is the person who struggles with this. Who I am is the person who fails in these ways. Can I improve? Of course. Can I get better at it? Of course. I'm a dynamic human being. But my personality, my nature, carries within it the susceptibility and the risks of those weaknesses. Certain people are more prone to certain kinds of failures. Certain people are more prone to certain kinds of sins because they have a natural inclination or are naturally drawn to certain temptations, certain kinds of behaviors, certain kinds of choices. And so, what is it that LeGuin is saying to us about real change and real tshuva for a person? Is you need to identify and identify with the shadow of yourself. You need to find and befriend that aspect of your identity. You need to reconnect with the fracture within yourself and make it no longer your shadow, but make it a part of your healthy, unified sense of self. You need to find an outlet for those aspects of your personality and psyche so that they can be channeled in a healthy way, in a productive way, in a positive way, rather than leading to failure, sin, corruption, whatever. Okay? And so he says, right, only one great power could have summoned up such a thing, and that is only one voice, your voice. You are the master of your own mistake. You are the one who owns it. You have to identify with it, right? The great lie that he's told by the forces of evil in chapter 7, right, is that only darkness can defeat the dark. And he stammers back, right? It is light that defeats the dark. There he's still thinking in this binary. But as he goes further and further and further, he finally realizes, okay, all things have a name. It called you by your name. You have to call it by its name. All of my acts have their echo in it, right? And there you go, the climax of the book. Sorry, I'm spoiling the ending of the book for everybody who hasn't read it, okay? Chapter 10. In silence, man and shadow met face to face and stopped. Here he is, at this point, he is walking on the surface of the sea out beyond the last island to the farthest east that anyone has ever sailed. Okay, I don't know what that's supposed to mean either. Okay. Aloud and clearly breaking that old silence, Ged spoke the shadow's name. And in the same moment, the shadow spoke. I'm getting goosebumps right now. Without lips or tongue, saying the same word, Ged. And the two voices were one voice. Ged reached out his hands, dropping his staff, and took hold of his shadow, of the black self that reached out to him. Light and darkness met and joined and were one. And he began to see the truth that Ged had neither lost nor won, but naming the shadow of his death with his own name, had made himself whole. A man who, knowing his whole true self, cannot be used or possessed by any power other than himself, and whose life, therefore, is lived for life's sake, and never in the service of ruin or pain or hatred or the dark. In the creation of Ea, which is the oldest song, it is said, only in silence the word, only in dark the light, only in dying life, bright the hawk's flight on the empty sky. Okay, so comes full circle back to what I said, the epigraph on the front page last week. And like I said, you just feel the goosebumps. What is he saying, right? This is the mastery of self and the self-knowledge that LeGuin is characterizing here as this ultimate achievement of tshuva, right? To rectify that failure and sin, he has to reach out and grab it and take hold of it. He has to own that it is part of him. So with that, I want to point to a different Rambam, which I think captures this, because again, I don't want to throw our rabbinic tradition under the bus. I want to find a voice for this in our traditional sources. And this is the other side of it, which is the idea of vidui we talked about last week. Here's the Rambam from Hilchot Teshuva, chapter 2. Sins which you have confessed this year, you must confess for them in future years. Even though you continue successful in your state of having repented for those sins, of having corrected the mistake. Shene'emar, ki fishai ani eda v'chatati negdi tamid. If anyone knows Tehillim, that's Tehillim 51. That's David's prayer of tshuva for his most notorious sin. It's like, I don't know how anybody ever teaches middle schoolers the book of Shmuel and they don't pause and take a look at Tehillim Nun Aleph, because it's like the whole point is that, like, don't get me started on middle school. Ugh. I teach high school. I taught 2 years. I taught middle school also. One of my colleagues on the faculty association, a preschool teacher, and I were discussing, because in our school, the preschool and the middle school have some programs together where the middle schoolers do thing is very cute. And she's a preschool teacher. I was a high school teacher. And we were talking about, she said, Dan, you have to understand, middle school is the preschool of high school. That's a very deep insight. Emotional regulation, the touching, the smells. Okay. People maybe know middle schoolers better than I do because my kids are still younger, but okay. What is the Rambam saying here about tshuva? Why should you have to repent? Why should you have to confess a sin in subsequent years if you are omeid b'tshuva, if you're successful in having confessed and succeeded in defeating the sin? This is an easy pitch now because I set it up, right? How can we read this Rambam now? What are you doing when you're confessing the sin that you had a whole past year where you didn't mess up? You've been working on your anger and the whole year has passed and you didn't get angry the way you used to get angry. You were in a toxic relationship with this person and you didn't have those kinds of toxic moments with them this past year, or you avoided them successfully. You used to be dishonest. You used to manipulate people. Yes, Kayla.
To be a little casual, it's like, Hashem is holding up, picture of something you did or a list of things you did and going, this you? And you're saying, yes, that's me, or that was me, that is me.
Yes,
Um,
it's that was me, and I'm now in continuity with my past when I used to fail in that way. Let me show off a little bit that I was successful now, right?
I mean, yes and no, not necessarily showing off the excess, but it's like,
Okay.
you're, God forbid you're, in a police interrogation, and even if it's for something that happened a long time ago, they're showing something and they're saying this you. It's like,
Right.
well, that was me at the time.
Right. So there's an honesty of not shying away from our past mistakes, right? The whole point, like we talked about last week, about articulating that the ability to confess honestly is demanding from us the ability to speak truth about ourselves in that way and to identify the problem very clearly and coherently. And this is saying, I can put that in my past. It's on my shelf. I'm not there right now. People know Star Trek Deep Space Nine, right? The first episode, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, when Cisco gets pulled into the wormhole and he's talking to the temporal aliens of the wormhole who live outside of our universe. They're like, why do you exist here? It's like, right? No, Kayla is the only one. Okay, maybe a couple people. Go back and watch Deep Space Nine. Now you can only watch it on like Peacock or something, right? They used to put all the Star Trek on Netflix. So you could watch everything. Anyway, so, right? All of our past, all of our memories, all of our experiences, like we do exist there. But we can also choose which things to dwell on and which things to occupy ourselves with and which things to focus on. And so when we have a traumatic memory, a traumatic experience, like Commander Cisco in first episode of the Star Trek Deep Space Nine, he's like, the aliens are asking him, like, why do you exist here? Why are you living in your trauma? Why are you living in your painful past? And Yom Kippur is an opportunity to check in with those moments of our painful past and also, like, yeah, that's part of me. That's why I'm who I am. That's part of my path. And I'm not there all the time, or I'm not there. I mean, chatati negdi tamid, right? It's before me, but it's like on the shelf. It's like there. It's accessible. I can tap into it. I can look at it. But I don't have to be in it all the time. A different way to put that, I guess, right, is where was I going? Oh no, I lost the thread again. Uh-oh, too much Star Trek. It's before me. It's on the shelf. What was I trying to say? It's on the shelf. You can
Continuity.
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 Yes, the continuity of the self, right? The sense that you are in, that it is a part of you. Oh, that's what it was. The Gemara says, right? Makom shebalei tshuva omdim ein tzadikim gemurim yecholim lamod. The place where a person who has undergone true change can stand is not the same place that the fully righteous can stand. What does that mean? That means if you had never struggled in that way, if you had never had that sin that you worked through and improved, then you never would be this person who you are now. You would be a different person, probably a more boring person. You would have, right? Like I said, right? Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Better to have sinned and repented than never to have sinned at all, seemingly, right? That is the growth and self-improvement and path that you have followed to reach that point is very much who you are as an improved, matured, grown person. And therefore being able to look back on it a year later or 10 years later or whatever and say, yes, that was me. And that is me. It's the same me. I have not changed my name. I am actually the same person as before. And I have changed who I am. Not that the name has changed. I don't disassociate with my past. I identify with my past, but I have grown and matured over time. You with me? You know why, a little bit more why I love this book? Okay, I hope so. Next week, what we're going to talk about is another aspect of tshuva, which I think there's even very, very thin precedent for in the rabbinic tradition, but I think I found a couple, which is the role that communal support can play in the process of tshuva. Because so often I think the narratives we tell about tshuva are those of a person has a moment of self-reflection, a moment of self-improvement, a desire to change who they are. And it's this very individualistic narrative that we tell, right? And even to the expense of severing people's relationships, right? Ushpizin, right? To be a Baal Tshuva means to cut off from your family and friends and community and everything and relocate and change your name and all these things, right? And counterpoint, again, I think both LeGuin's book and a healthier sense of psychology and human development and how we relate to ourselves is what are the ways that our community, our support networks, friends, mentors, etc., serve as a tool for us in the process of tshuva, something which in classical rabbinic sources I think is underexplored, and yet there's some pieces that we'll put together, and of course see how LeGuin captures it, I think, in a beautiful way, because the book is as much, of course, as about Ged's personal transformation. We're going to see the role that his relationship with his friends plays in the book as well. And so that's another piece. And look forward to seeing everyone next week, as we really like. Next week is like right before Rosh Hashanah. It's like really like it's getting close. I hope everybody's got their menus planned and their shopping planned and all the things, right? I haven't. So that's the Harabah Shana Tova to everybody. It's been wonderful learning with all of you, and keep learning with Drisha, Kayla, whatever else you want to say at the end.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
I just want to let people know that there is a new class starting this Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. Halacha in Action, She'elot Utshuvot of the High Holiday Period with Rav Nati Helfgott. You can sign up for this at drisha.org/classes. And I hope to see as many of you as possible next week. I know it's a busy time, but I hope to see you all. Take care.